Change isn't just coming, it's already here. This is Ask for Change podcast, hosted by leadership expert Meridith Elliott Powell. Brings you weekly conversations with leaders and experts who are redefining success in a world of disruption. Let's begin today's journey and turn uncertainty into your competitive advantage.
Let's turn uncertainty into your competitive advantage. Hey, I'm Meridith Elliott Powell, and welcome to Ask for Change, the podcast where we dive into the strategies, everything that you need to know to turn uncertainty into your greatest competitive advantage. And let me tell you, today there is a lot of uncertainty, and we've got one of our favorite guests back. You've seen this guest on here probably 4 or 5 times before, but she is here to talk about new information, a new book, and a new set of strategies for all the leaders out there listening that you need to know to really turn this marketplace into incredible opportunity. I want to welcome to the show, Dr. Mary Kelly. Welcome.
Meridith, I'm so glad to be back with your folks today. We are in such a time of uncertainty and crisis and change. And you and I are both seeing people really struggle with what's going on.
Yeah, it is. These are, for certain challenging times. I was just listening to the news this morning, listening to about 6 panelists. And from what I can tell, nobody is really sure what is going to happen. I mean, this economy is going to take off if gas prices come back down. If they don't, sounds like we're in some serious trouble. Economy could boom if this war in the Middle East was over. If it doesn't stop, there's a lot more uncertainty coming. But you have a brand new book that you've written with the legendary Peter Stark called Leadership is Tough. So kind of give us an overview and a sneak peek of the book and when it's going to be available.
Thanks so much. As you know, Peter is a brilliant strategist. And when we were first talking about this project, the issue was great leaders, really the great leaders, the people whose names you are familiar with in the business world, the people who are always on the news, the people who are leading the AI charge, you know their names. They think differently than other people. The really true great military leaders think differently than other people. And we delved into this over the course of several years. We researched a lot of these great leaders, and we asked what breaks them out from the pack, what makes them so much better, and how can the rest of people get to that level. So we looked at it in terms of their skills, their decision-making ability, and their disciplines. What skill set do they have that is better than the rest of us? It might be technological skill. It might be people skills. It might be negotiating skills. It might be financial skills. And then what decisions were they faced with that really solidified them as great leaders? And then what disciplines do they practice that other people don't? And that's where we started with this book called Leadership is Tough.
I got to tell you that I love that you called a spade on the title of this book, because leadership is really tough. It is really hard. And I think we undersell how difficult leadership is. I think we also undersell how important leadership is, how much a leader matters. Yesterday, I was speaking on a stage in Dallas, Texas, and I was telling a story about the importance of a leader with a vision. And an audience member had shared a story where the leader that she had worked for had talked about the vision relentlessly. And the truth is, the vision was impossible. But they accomplished the vision. But the moment that CEO left and a new CEO came in, that CEO didn't talk about a vision and the company went backwards. So I'm interested, let's start with why leadership matters in an uncertain marketplace, and why you all went with the title of Why Leadership is Tough.
Well, there are about 5 million books out there on how to be a great leader. But a lot of them do sugarcoat it. They say things like, oh, if you just do this, then this will magically happen. And the truth is, we're not leading demographics. You're not leading, 5,000 people who all think like you. You're not leading the masses. You're leading individuals. And every single individual person has to feel, understand, and know where they're going, how to be successful, what your vision is, and how they play a part in this. And when you're in an uncertain time and a change fatigued world, which we are, one of the things that leaders have to do is exactly what you're talking about. They have to reiterate that vision, that message over and over and over, because the reality is people go back to what they were first taught. And think about when you first learned how to drive. If you are in the United States, you learned how to drive on the right side of the road. And you did that when you were 15, 16 years old. Now, if you go drive in Ireland or Australia, you have to adjust your thinking to that new way. And you've got to be constantly reminding yourself, stay left, look right, stay left, look right, instead of stay right, look left, which is how we were taught. If you're not constantly being reminded, stay left, look right, you go back to what's going on the right-hand side of the road, especially during times of crisis. And this is the example I use. So let's say you're driving on a dirt road in Australia and it's dark out and you see headlights coming at you. Your natural instinct is to go right. Their natural instinct is to go left. And now you have a problem. So if you don't continue to remind people what's going on, why the change, reassure people it's going to be okay, they will revert back to what they first learned. And this is where you got to remember, most people's first job at 18 or 22, they didn't know what the vision was. They didn't know necessarily what the mission was. But that is the behavior and the actions they revert back to during times of heavy stress and crisis.
So let's dive into a little book, a little bit into the book. I mean, you and Peter did so much research on this book. I mean, it's really grounded, like you said, I'll use your terminology. It's really, really solid. And I think that's what people need today, right? Is a very solid book that when they read it, they can put these tools and strategies into place. What are some of the differences? What are some of the unique aspects or some of the things that we can learn from some of the leaders that you studied?
So early in the book, there's a chapter on leading change in an uncertain and change fatigued world, because we are certainly there. And we talk about how a lot of the principles that you discuss as well in your programs and your books, and that is change has to be embraced. You have to ask for the change and you have to be leading the change. If you're just floating with the tide, you're swimming with the tide, you're not leading. You got to get out ahead of it and you got to lead the change, even when it's uncomfortable, especially when it's uncomfortable. If people don't see you out there, then they're not going to follow anything you say. So we talk about that. And we also talk about the fact that you as the leader need to be the one who is modeling the behavior you want. You've got to be modeling the change. You've got to be the person who's using the new technology. It reminds me of the good old days of AOL and dial-up internet. And I remember reading that the current head of AOL didn't actually know how to use email back in the day. So would have his secretary, we had secretaries back then, print out all his emails and he would make changes on it and she would type up the responses and send it. That's what we're talking about. You've got to be the person who is modeling the change. You've got to be leading it. You've got to embrace it. You've got to ask for it. Even if you're not exactly sure where that change is going to land, you've got to be constantly pushing for your vision to get there. Because if you don't, the decision gets made without you in the room. And this is in one of our chapters on strategic decision making. When you're the one who's making the decision, you've got to make the call before the call is made for you. And this is where we're seeing a lot of businesses. They're just letting forces overtake them. They're letting the markets, like the current volatile market, dictate their business decisions. That is a terrible way to run a business. There are things you can control and there are things you cannot, and you need to take control of the things you can control.
Yeah. I think that, that leadership in an uncertain marketplace is definitely about taking control. I mean, either it can dictate your future or you can decide what's going to happen. But when you look at the marketplace right now and you think about what it really takes to lead through it, what are some of the most important skills that you found that leaders today need to have in order to be successful and lead their teams in an uncertain marketplace?
The great leaders we studied for this book have a few skills that they do exceptionally well. First, they build trust extremely well. If they say they're going to do something, they do it. If they say, I'm going to keep you informed, they do it. If they say, we are going to have to cut jobs, this is what I know now, I will give you an update every Friday at 3 o'clock, they do it. Even if they don't have as much information as people would like, they're honest and transparent about what's going on, especially bad news. People can handle tough news. What they can't handle is no news. No news feeds the rumor mill, feeds the uncertainty, creates chaos. People imagine a worse scenario than what actually is going on. So they do a great job at building trust. Another area where great leaders are terrific is they understand the difference between empathy and sympathy. They can empathize with people without making excuses for why that person can't work or can't get something done. They can empathize. Hey, this is a really tough situation, and these are the expectations. Even if people are having personal crises, even if there's things going on, they empathize rather than sympathize. There's a difference. And they say, all right, how do we work through this so that you are successful in this organization? So they're very good at understanding that you have to empathize, but you don't lower the bar. You still have standards to maintain. They continue to maintain standards.
Yeah.
And then another area that they're great at is a skill, and that's holding people accountable when it's tough. Because when things get, like, especially COVID, we saw this happen all the time. People went home, they said, I'm working from home. A lot of people were not working from home. They weren't doing anything from home. They binge watched TV, they made sourdough bread. I don't know what people were doing, but they certainly weren't working. And there's times when you have to be empathetic and understanding and provide flexibility to your people, but you also have to hold people accountable for the job they were hired to do. And you don't do that by being a jerk. You do that by being a great leader that people want to follow, that people don't want to disappoint. And those are just some of the skills that I think are really important.
How do you know you're effective as a leader?
Ooh, that's such a great question. I think you're effective as a leader when your people are developed to the point where you can take a 2-week vacation and everything works great. I think that's perfect. I think that's great success. When you can take off and know that your team, your business, your 75,000 person organization is not going to fall apart because you are not there every single day. I think that's great success, because that means you have adequately and competently developed your people to the point where they're making good decisions. They are showing up every day. They continue to stay motivated, stay entrenched, stay focused, even when nobody's watching them.
Are there priority skills? Are there things that leaders need to focus more on than anything else in today's marketplace? And is leading in uncertainty different than leading in other times?
Oh, I think it is different leading in uncertainty than other times, and here's why. What leading in uncertainty does is it kind of lays bare the problems. If you weren't running a good organization before, all of a sudden, all of the market forces, the economic uncertainty, all the uncertainty that we're playing with in the geopolitical world, it makes those glaring errors very obvious. Before, you may have been able to gloss over those things. Those things weren't very evident. But now your errors are being laid wide open for everybody to see. And that's your shareholders, your customers, your employees, your board members. People can see the problems now because it's evident. And part of me really likes that, because there is a very good distinction between a great running company and a company that looks pretty good from the outside, but it's just limping along. And until you really get hit by stress, you don't know the difference necessarily between them.
Yeah, I think it really is interesting is that, every once in every so many years, I mean, we hit some kind of blip in the
Mm.
marketplace, whether it's a recession, whether it's, just like we're dealing with gas prices now. I mean, those types of things. And it does sort of clean the market, right? Like those industries where those companies were just, everything looked good on the surface, but you got underneath, they didn't have enough to really survive a marketplace like this. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, and you're exactly right about that. And that is when things are easy, and for some industries, COVID was a boom in some industries. The HVAC did very well during COVID.
Yes.
Home construction did very well during COVID. Remodeling did very well during COVID. But it also kind of masked the fact that some things were problematic. They were different. They were not working as well as they could have been. So when you're enjoying those good times, it's so easy to get complacent. It's so easy to be so proud of yourself. The example I use is when I lived in Hawaii, I thought I could garden because anything grew. I would throw stuff in the ground and things grew. I was growing carrots and basil and lime trees, and I thought, I am a great gardener. Was it me? No, it was not.
Yeah.
It was the fact that it's Hawaii and everything grows in Hawaii. And then I move to Colorado and nothing grows at 7,500 feet. I can't grow anything. I'm lucky to keep an herb alive inside my house. That's what I'm talking about. Sometimes the situation makes you look great and you can ride that for a while, but sometimes you got to up your game. And that's what this book Leadership is Tough is about. How do you up your game? How do you, if you're not the business owner, or you want to be the business owner, or you want to be in the C-suite, or you want to aspire to that, how do you get there? And then if you're already there, how do you continue to make good decisions so that during times of uncertainty and change fatigue, you are still thriving instead of struggling?
Why is accountability such a problem for leaders? Why is holding holding people accountable to do the work? I don't care what organization I work in. I see two things happen. I see number one, leaders lean way too hard on their good employees. I call it riding your horse until your horse just gets exhausted and collapses.
Mm-hmm.
And they refuse or are unwilling to hold people accountable to do the work that they've been asked to do.
100%. We map this out in our chapter called Holding the Line Without Breaking Trust. And that's accountability. One of the questions I love is asking people, what happens if we don't hold ourselves accountable? Let's say we're making pharmaceuticals and we don't hold ourselves accountable for the dosages that we're providing. Somebody dies. What happens if we don't hold ourselves accountable? And I love coffee, as you know, but if that barista gets my coffee order wrong, I'm probably still going to drink it. I'm not going to complain. I'm not going to send it back, and I'm still going to go back the next day. The stakes are different in certain areas.
Yeah.
So what happens if we don't hold ourselves accountable? And in this chapter in the book, we map out the 4 different kinds of accountability. First, you have to hold yourself accountable. And if you're not holding yourself accountable, then anything you say to someone else just lands false, because they are like, all right, you're talking, but you're not walking. We're not paying attention to you. And then you have to hold individuals accountable. And this is where the breakdown starts, because people say, well, they'll fix it themselves. No, they won't. They'll certainly see the problem and they'll self-correct. No, they won't. They don't know if they're not doing the right thing sometimes. And sometimes they go, well, what if I just cut this corner a little bit? Will anybody notice? If nobody notices, those cut corners become bigger. And paradoxically, you're absolutely right. We give our best workers more work. Meanwhile, Joe Bob over there, who hasn't really done their job in years, we let them skate. Why? Sometimes it's because it's a family friend who got hired into the family business. Sometimes it's a buddy of the CEO, and nobody wants to touch that because they know that if they correct the CEO's buddy, when they play golf this weekend, he's going to hear about it. And then I could get in trouble. In many organizations, holding individuals accountable comes with career risk, because if they do, they could be at risk. So that's a problem. And then you got to hold teams accountable. And that becomes even more difficult when certain individuals are allowed to not do their job right. That's an issue. And then we've also dived into when organizations as a whole don't hold themselves accountable. And you think of
Mm,
organizations who have really struggled throughout the years. Either boards didn't hold the CEO accountable, the CEO didn't hold their people accountable, people just felt like they could show up to work and not give 100%. That's the kind of organizational real breakdown that we see in organizations that ultimately fail, go bankrupt, struggle, because they didn't take action soon enough to correct the problem. And a lot of people, and you've seen this, they don't want to go in and say, hey, Joe Bob, you gave me this report. Do you know it's wrong in 5 places?
yeah.
They don't want to do that because they want to be liked. They want to be personally liked. And especially during times of change, people need reassurance. And they're like,
Yeah.
oh, I don't want to rock the boat. Everything is so hard anyway. I just won't create more confusion, more chaos, more uncertainty by holding somebody accountable. They don't realize it's exactly the opposite, that holding people accountable is even more important when things are uncertain, because that's a certainty that you have to have in the workplace.
Yeah, all day long. Mary, what do you and Peter hope that people gain from this book?
First and foremost, I hope they gain hope. That first off, yes, leadership is tough, and we acknowledge that all day long in every chapter. We know leadership, if you're doing it right, is really, really hard. It means showing up every day, thinking about it every single day, making good decisions every day, having the right disciplines every single day, and knowing that if you make a mistake, it's going to be loud and big, and you're going to have to be accountable for that mistake. But it's also worth it, because we need great people to step up to the plate. We need great people to lead organizations and nonprofits and governments, because we need great people to consistently do the right thing. And the hope of the book, Leadership is Tough, is to make it easier, to say, look, these people have done this. They've had to make tough decisions. This is what you do in this situation. And here's the playbook so that you don't feel like you're so alone.
I love that. Here is the playbook. Here is the playbook. And so you don't feel alone, which is what leaders feel all the time. What is hard to believe, but we are basically at the end of this podcast. And I always like to end with 2 questions. You can answer them in either order. Number 1, how do people find out about you? How do they find out about the book? How do they order their copy? And how do they figure out to master leadership that is downright tough? The second question is, what is your greatest piece of advice for people facing adversity, uncertainty, constant change out there? What is your tip to help them turn uncertainty into their greatest competitive advantage?
Both great questions. The book is on Amazon. It is called Leadership is Tough, What Great Leaders Do Differently by Mary Kelly and Peter Stark. It's on Amazon. You can find more information as well as some of the fun videos we made very recently while working on the book at productiveleaders.com/tough. And there's more information about the book and kind of our thoughts around it. There's a book club outline. There's all of that to really help leaders move forward in a way that works for them. And then to answer the issue of, how can we help leaders? How can we do certain things that make leadership easier in an uncertain and change fatigued world? And I always said the piece of advice is action trumps uncertainty. If you don't know what to do, take the right action in the right direction. Even one step forward in the right direction makes a difference. If you are letting things happen to you, you are reactive, not proactive. And that in and of itself is a loss of control, and it will make you feel more like you're floundering. So take the right action, one step in the right direction. A ship in the middle of the ocean has to pick a direction and go in that direction. So find your direction and head in that direction. And if you need help, reach out to other people in your life who can help you. Talk through it with somebody you trust. Take the right step in the right direction.
I love that. Mary, you have been an incredible guest. We are excited about the book, Leadership is Tough. We'll have all that information in the show notes, and see if you and Peter can't get that information out there to really help people through these challenging times. And to all of you, thank you for joining us for another episode of Ask for Change. We'll see you right back here next week. And remember, Together, we are going to turn all of this uncertainty into your greatest competitive advantage. I'll see you next week.